Game publishers don't want you to use this Xbox feature. Fans are furious over this latest Starfield move. Here's what's coming to Game Pass in July. Let's discuss. What's up, guys, and welcome to Xbox Ready, the YouTube channel that is dedicated to all things Xbox. I come on here and I talk the latest Xbox news, rumors, I do unboxing sometimes, I talk the latest Xbox accessories, games, I bring guests on, I do all sorts of stuff as long as it is related to Xbox in some way. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you want to stay Xbox Ready, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm also trying to post more stuff on Instagram as well. That's kind of like my platform of choice nowadays. So if you want to give me a follow there, my handle is @StateOfRay. Also, as a reminder, I have links to all sorts of Xbox stuff beneath this video. Now they have like little pictures to go along with it. I would really appreciate it if you use those links to buy them because it goes a long way in helping out the channel. But enough about that stuff. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Over the past couple of days, Microsoft has been involved in a court hearing with the FTC here in the United States that is going to determine the future of their proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Now, over these past couple of days, we've had some interesting testimony from a number of people. We've learned some juicy things, we've learned some not so juicy things. Sometimes the juicy things look juicy at first, but then you read into it and you're like, wait, this is just a whole bunch of nothing. Day 4 of this 5-day hearing has been more or less the same. We've seen testimonies from Jim Ryan, Bobby Kotick, and Satya Nadella. Now, for those of you who do not know, Jim Ryan is the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment. And Mr. Ryan has had some interesting things to say about Xbox, about Game Pass, and about this deal in general. Now, we know a huge part of the FTC's argument against Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard basically hinges on how Microsoft and Xbox have chosen to handle the ZeniMax Media acquisition, i.e. Bethesda games. Their argument is that, well, Microsoft, Xbox, they bought up Bethesda, they bought up their parent company ZeniMax Media, which used to make multi-platform games, but now that they're owned by Microsoft, they're not multi-platform anymore. Games like Redfall and Starfield. So what's to stop them from doing that with any Activision Blizzard game? Trying to make the argument that Microsoft's handling of Bethesda games is anti-competitive. Well, when asked straight up by lawyers, Jim Ryan says, hey, I don't like that Starfield is exclusive to Xbox, but I don't believe it is anti-competitive. Even though Jim Ryan expected Redfall and Starfield to make its way over to PlayStation consoles. Should be an open and closed case, right? The biggest opponent of this deal, Sony PlayStation, does not believe that Starfield being exclusive to Xbox is anti-competitive. Of course, this hearing is not about Starfield, it's not about Bethesda, it's not about Redfall, it's not about any of that stuff, it's about Activision Blizzard. And Jim Ryan apparently clarified that in a conversation with Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision Blizzard, that he thinks that that deal, that acquisition, is anti-competitive and he wants it blocked. He also made a very bold claim about Game Pass. I talked to all the publishers and they unanimously do not like Game Pass because it is value destructive. He also mentioned that he's never asked Bobby Kotick or Activision Blizzard to bring new versions of Call of Duty to PlayStation's version of Game Pass, PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium. We knew that Bobby Kotick had been very public and very vocal that he did not see that as a route he wanted to take Activision Blizzard down. So it's one thing for Jim Ryan to be like, I talked to all these publishers, they hate it. It's very general, very vague. But paired with Bobby Kotick's later testimony, it becomes sort of interesting because he does mention he does not like gaming subscription services and that Activision Blizzard is not interested in putting their games on any of them. This further cements the idea that without this deal going through, that we're not going to see Activision Blizzard titles on Game Pass or even on PlayStation Plus and Premium. Bobby Kotick mentioned that he lives in LA and that he's seen the adverse effects that streaming and subscription services have had on the film and television industry. Services like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, HBO Max, Paramount Plus, Peacock, whatever, take your pick. Now, this is interesting to me for a number of reasons. This is a topic of discussion that comes up like every couple of months. Game Pass is good because this, and this. No, Game Pass is bad because this, and this. It's going to destroy the industry, blah, 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 blah. And while I'm a fan of Game Pass and I'm a fan of Xbox, obviously, I'm sitting here chatting to you on my Xbox YouTube channel. Y'all know me and y'all know that I try as best as I can to remain objective when it comes to these things. And when it comes to Game Pass, I can see both the good and the potential bad that it can bring. On one end, in a world that is constantly getting more and more expensive to live in, Game Pass is a great option to have. And currently we live in a world where games are pretty expensive, rightfully so because they're expensive to make. And so here with Game Pass, Xbox is giving us an option saying, hey, even if you don't have have $70 to spend on Starfield coming up. If you have $10, you can go ahead and play it. Game Pass has also exposed me to a lot of new games that I never would have tried, especially a lot of the smaller indie titles. And I know there are a number of indie developers that like Game Pass as well. The team behind Planet of Lana said in a recent interview that it was surreal to see the success of the game on Xbox and PC, and a huge part of that was a lot of people playing it through Game Pass. But on the other end, I don't think it's a cut and dry situation. Yes, I think Game Pass is great, but I don't know how it's going to affect the industry 5-10 years down the line. And we've certainly seen some bad things coming from streaming, from subscription services when it comes to the film and television industry. Streaming services like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, all they're interested in is just like compiling a bunch of exclusive content, whether or not it's good or bad. In my opinion, it's essentially a numbers game for them. They're like, okay, we'll greenlight 20 shows, and if only 2 of them are good, it'll still be worth it for us. And so far with Xbox Game Pass, a lot of their day one editions, some of them are really good, and then others, they're not so good. So for me, there is a little bit of worry of like, are they gonna go just like straight quantity, or are we gonna get like really awesome gaming experiences on Game Pass? So far, it's been kind of up and down. I also live in LA, and one of the big things going on right now is that the writers are on strike, and starting in July, the Screen Actors Guild is also gonna go on strike, the actors. And a huge part of that is because apparently the contracts for a lot of these streaming shows are terrible. Of course, I would hate to see that happen in the video game industry. Like, oh, we got all these developers catering towards streaming only content. Let's pay them like crap. Let's overwork them. That's obviously a no good. Whether or not that's actually going to happen with Game Pass in the video game industry, that remains to be seen. Me personally, I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to believe, because right now there's only one Game Pass, and Sony has made it clear they don't want to have the same strategy as Xbox with Game Pass. Nintendo, they're doing their own thing as well, so it's not like streaming subscription services are the dominant force in the gaming industry. You still have the options to buy games traditionally. You could buy all the games on the Game Pass catalog if you really want to. There are some other interesting facts and tidbits from day 4 of this hearing. Apparently, only a small percentage of Game Pass Ultimate subscribers use cloud gaming. And throughout this whole process, throughout this whole FTC review, Xbox has not seemed very enthusiastic about cloud gaming in general. Comparing that to Nvidia, it's like the opposite. Apparently, they believe that cloud gaming could be mainstream and extremely profitable for them. A large part of Bobby Kotick's questioning revolved around, how are you going to get Call of Duty on Switch? And in his answers, it seems like Xbox and Activision, they're banking on new hardware from Nintendo to come out before they fully commit to being like, okay, we're gonna bring Call of Duty to Nintendo consoles. Bobby Kotick also said that he regrets not making a version of Call of Duty for the Nintendo Switch, just because there's so many Switches out there. There's like hundreds of millions of Switches out there. It's like, dang, I'm just leaving all that money on the table. Sony apparently doesn't want to share plans for the PlayStation 6 if Activision is bought out by Microsoft, because they don't want a studio that's owned by a competitor to have access to that information. Which, you know, at first I was like, that's kind of petty, like why wouldn't they share specs for their next console? But I'm like, okay, if you put it that way, I guess that makes sense, but again, it's not ideal. None of this is really ideal if you're Sony. It was also revealed during this hearing that they make like just shy of $1 billion every year off of Call of Duty over on PlayStation. And that's not even including all the other resources that players dump into Call of Duty once they buy the game. Jim Ryan also mentioned that Bungie would give them way more than Activision ever could. Now that is a bold claim, considering like the resources that Activision has and all of the IP they got, versus Bungie, which is like, okay, they got a really big IP, but it's not like multiple ones. Also, Jim Ryan admitted that demand for the Xbox Series X and S has been strong, especially in the US. Now let's talk about Starfield. The discourse around this game has been very up and down. Excitement for it was at an all-time high after Starfield Direct earlier this month. But then people were getting mad because they were like, oh, there's not going to be a physical disc of Starfield, and then they were like, oh no, just kidding, there is going to be a physical disc. And now there's another pseudo kind of mini controversy surrounding Starfield. Todd Howard came out and made a video saying that AMD is the official exclusive partner for the PC version of Starfield. Now this is pretty good news if you're planning on playing Starfield on an Xbox, because your Xbox console is powered by an AMD GPU. So we can assume that because AMD and Bethesda Bethesda have been working closely on this, that it'll be pretty well optimized, at least on consoles. But if you're planning on playing on PC, there's like a 50% chance that you are absolutely furious. You're fuming over this news. At least that's what I've been seeing online. And that's because for any of you out there who have an RTX or any NVIDIA GeForce card, you won't be able to use DLSS 2 or 3 while playing Starfield. Now, for those of you who don't know, like all my console audience out there, AMD and NVIDIA have their own versions of upscaling things when you're running on lower resolutions and performance modes. For AMD, it's FSR. For NVIDIA, it's DLSS. From my understanding, and I'm treading carefully here because I know this is a sensitive topic, but the two usually are considered to be like pretty good in what they do. But again, from my understanding, DLSS usually takes an edge because they have these fancy AI cores that help them upscale. And man, guys, I went down a rabbit hole because prior to this, as you know, I'm recently into the PC gaming world. I used to think that PC gamers were united. They were the PC master race, always making fun of people who play on console. And through this news, I found out like an even more niche tech war than the console wars. People were so mad. Over on Twitter, this guy is saying, we need to start a boycott of AMD for this anti-competitive garbage. They are intentionally blocking DLSS support in games they sponsor, something that NVIDIA does not do at all. And it's getting heated in these replies. Like, people are really mad over this decision. Of course, there is some hope that once the game comes out, modders will eventually add in that DLSS support. There's already some anxiety when it comes to the release of this game because traditionally Bethesda, when they drop a game, they're pretty fun, they're usually pretty awesome, iconic, but they do come with their fair share of bugs. And we also know that over the past couple of years, Xbox has not been the best when it comes to the PC versions of their games. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I remember when Halo Infinite launched, a lot of people were having problems over on PC, which was especially frustrating because all my friends were playing on PC, and they were constantly having to deal with crashes, desync issues, all sorts of stuff. So I'm hoping that this partnership with AMD and Bethesda doesn't lead to any crazy glitches or performance issues or anything like that. Xbox and Bethesda have come out and said that Starfield, it's the least buggy Bethesda game ever, which is kind of a weird flex to be honest, but okay. I know a lot of people are interested in playing Starfield on PC, especially because you can't get 60 frames on consoles, so I'm just hoping that it works out, especially because Xbox has identified the PC market as a huge growth opportunity for them, and we know that a ton of people are buying this game on Steam, so hopefully everything comes out well optimized, there's little to no bugs or glitches, because if there's a bad PC version of this game at launch, it's not gonna go over super well. Now let's talk about what Game Pass subscribers have to look forward to over the next couple of weeks. For anyone who used to play Harvest Moon Friends of Mineral Town on Game Boy Advance back in the day, the remake of that game that came out a couple of years ago is now coming to Game Pass. On June 29th, Story of Seasons Friends of Mineral Town is going to be added to the catalog. It's described as a reimagining of the Game Boy Advance version with way better graphics, of course. And according to Nintendo Life, if you're looking for something to fill that post-Animal Crossing hole in your life, or are just simply a fan of the farm sim genre in general, don't miss out on this one. My worry is that, like, are there too many of these games out in the wild now? Like, this is a game that my wife would definitely be interested in, but like, is it interesting enough to pull her away from Animal Crossing, from Disney Dreamlight Valley, and all the other versions of that game that she plays? On July 3rd, Arcade Paradise is being added, and this is essentially a sim game where you run and build your own arcade. Action RPG Sword and Fairy 7 is going to be added 2 days later on July 5th. Sword and Fairy Together Forever not only features the most advanced graphics in series history, but it also introduces dynamic real-time combat mechanics with total freedom of movement and fluid screen-filling skill animations. I guess for anyone who is missing out on Final Fantasy XVI, this seems like something that can sort of scratch their itch. Exoprimal is coming out on July 14th. You've probably seen a lot of marketing for this game. You play as someone in this exoskeleton that is fighting off waves and waves of dinosaurs. It's an online co-op game where you compete against other people or sometimes on the same team to fulfill certain objectives, all the while killing a bunch of dinosaurs. This game either looks like it's going to be super awesome or it's going to be something that I play an hour of and I'm like, okay, I'm over it. But the premise, I will say, is pretty dope. Like, I'm flying around in this exoskeleton, this like Iron Man looking suit, and I'm just mowing down waves and waves of different dinosaurs. The Wandering Village is coming out on July 20th, and this is a city building game that takes place on the back of a giant beast. Now, obviously the most exciting thing, at least for me, is Exoprimal. But again, I feel like it could be a game that is going to be awesome, or it's a game that a bunch of people are going to try for an hour and then fall off on it. The months of July and August are like kind of questionable. Obviously, in September we're getting Starfield, but I'll be interested to see what else they're going to be adding in the month of July and definitely August, especially because we know that they're going to be raising the price of Game Pass starting in July. Anyways, guys, that's all the stuff I wanted to talk about today. Thanks so much for joining me for another edition of Xbox Ready, and we'll see you in the next video.